Good morning. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme song is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss, and my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. This week, Indiana recovers from extreme weather. War in the Middle East leaves U.S. allies in East Asia vulnerable. The national debt tops a major milestone. Another slate of primary elections Tuesday, plus the Hoosier State is ground zero for the culture wars, all that and more. But before we begin, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. Get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making the state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it's PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let's welcome this week's guests. First, she's a board-certified behavior analyst, disability advocate, newspaper columnist, and former State House candidate. It's been too long, but she's back. There's Jennifer David. Jennifer, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. It has been a while. I'm glad to be back.
Well, I'm glad to have you back on the show. You always have such insightful things to say. Let's welcome our... Very good. Thank you. So our other guest, one of our favorite returning guests over the last several months, my Bloomington DSA comrade, Bryce Greene. Bryce, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Aaron. It's always good to be here. I don't know why I called you Aaron, Scott, Aaron, whatever.
Listen, I go by Scott, but I get Aaron a lot now that I use my my full government name. So
well, why'd you do that? When did you start doing that?
I don't know.
Is there a Scott Rogers that's like evil that you're trying to avoid?
No, honestly, I'm trying to reclaim the name from a certain former Packers quarterback who has besmirched the Rogers name with his shenanigans and also with the improper spelling. There is no D in Rogers.
That's a hill to die on.
There you go.
Listen, you got to pick one, right? So let's go ahead and get started. And when we recorded last week's show, we had covered a major weather pattern that had affected the entire state. So the previous Tuesday, a destructive derecho tore across northwest Indiana before dumping massive amounts of rain on the central and eastern parts of the state. This week, as waters recede, communities like Cambridge City, Hagerstown, Yorktown, Metamora, Muncie, Newcastle, Connorsville, Brownsville, Fishers, Noblesville, and Carmel, among others, face long recoveries, thousands of damaged homes, most of which are uncovered by flood insurance, and millions of dollars in infrastructure repairs. Recovery in Delaware County was briefly hampered this week when a tornado touched down Wednesday. Now, thankfully, there was no more damage. Governor Mike Braun announced the state has opened grants for emergency food, clothing, temporary housing, and other basic needs. President Trump approved an emergency declaration last Saturday, which allows some federal resources to flow into the state, but that assistance is capped at a mere $5 million. The state's relief fund was down to just $2 million after a summer full of climate change-induced severe weather, and estimates from this storm alone could exceed $5 billion. Now, what is really needed from the feds is a major disaster proclamation, which could open up significantly more assistance. The governor officially submitted that request Thursday night and was expecting a decision within 48 hours, and the state's full 11-person congressional delegation wrote a letter urging the president to come through, though to my knowledge, it still has not been fulfilled, and a separate request from a tornado outbreak in June is still pending. In Indianapolis, Mayor Joe Hogsett has come under fire for mismanagement of the city's response to the flooding. And back up in Northwest Indiana, the first part of the state affected by the storms, some communities remain without for nearly 2 weeks, with much of Gary still in the dark. A class action suit was filed against NIPSCO Friday, that's the electric utility in the area, alleging inadequate maintenance and oversight leading up to the event. Bryce, I don't know. I can't imagine why here we are 2 weeks after this event, the community of Gary is the last one to still get their lights turned on.
All right. I couldn't imagine why. I've never seen the state of Indiana act in any way discriminatory towards any of its residents. You know, I'm sure they just want what's best for everybody. But real talk, like this is like, yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you would expect given the state of not only the country, but also like Indiana in general. And these people, they're not subtle about their disdain for any kind of blue dot in the state. They want it, stamped out. They want people to suffer. The reason that they don't fund teachers, the reason that they don't fund serious infrastructure, the reason that they don't fund any of this stuff is because they want people to suffer, or at the very least, they don't care if people do suffer. They're just non-entities to them, and I think this is part of the broader trend of a complete failure to protect people at the state and federal level. And it's no surprise that the Braun administration and the Trump administration behind him are dragging their feet on doing any sort of serious addressing to this crisis. It compounds many other crises on top of it, like the lack of economic investment, the lack of a serious development plan for these areas. But I mean, it's just on top of just like the pure racist mentality, right? And when we say racist, like in these people's hearts, they don't necessarily have to say, well, I see, one of the blackest cities in the world, and I'm going to say, screw you. It's that they're saying screw you on the basis of lines that have been racially drawn. And that has the effect of, being effectively an attack on black people, on a black community. It's really ridiculous.
Well, and lest people accuse us of playing the race card, as it were, Gary is a financially disadvantaged community. This is a poor community. They've seen their industrial base dry up. I want to say like at least a third of the people there live in poverty. But Jennifer, we've got a lot of small towns in the east central part of the state, little more rural communities, also not doing the best monetarily. They're going to be neglected by this government as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just a continuation of what we continue to see from the Republican Party and the, 25 plus years of their trifecta in our state. And it's absolutely no surprise that they just left Gary to just hang. I mean, these people, I was catching up on the news this morning. It's been, almost 2 weeks. There's a lot of homes. People, as you pointed out, this is a disadvantaged area. The income level is not extremely high. So you have families talking this morning about, food, not having food. People after, 3 days having to throw out the groceries that they got, probably on the weekend when a lot of people do the shopping, and, homes destroyed. Right now people still haven't even been back to those places. So it's just going to get worse. And right now, kind of dealing with this crisis, which was, still in crisis. It hasn't resolved. And the worst is yet to come. The fallout from all of this and trying to rebuild, people rebuilding their lives, rebuilding their homes, in many cases having to find new homes. There's a lot more that we should, that Gary should be receiving from the government and, all of the communities, including the rural communities that are in crisis right now. But kind of seems like some punishment, I think, in some of these communities, and also wonder if not getting some of this money has anything to do with, hey, we didn't do the redistricting. So
Well, there's certainly the potential that there is retribution coming from the Trump administration. I want to ask about that. FEMA. We talked about this last week, that Elon Musk and his child army at Doge went through the federal government last spring, and they cut a bunch of programs. FEMA was one that was particularly affected. And we've got this declaration. We're still waiting on the major declaration. We're still waiting on the major declaration from all those tornadoes that went through in June. I want to say the one in Muncie Wednesday was the 87th official tornado to have touched down in Indiana this year, which is 4 years worth on average in less than a single year now at this point. But FEMA may not ever be coming. Is there any FEMA left to come?
That's what I was going to say. Is there? What is left of it?
Bryce, the whole thing is giving Katrina vibes.
Yeah, I wish that it would be kind of like a scandal the way Katrina was, right? Like, that actually hurt the George W. Bush administration. People had to go on TV and say, "Oh, well, we're sorry, we screwed up." And I think, if things get worse, we're kind of close to having Blackwater mercenaries being flown in the same way you had during Katrina. But that was during a different time, a time where there was far more public accountability to when things went wrong, right? I mean, how many disasters have happened over the last year and a half of Trump 2.0 that just don't get covered because each disaster is subsumed by the next disaster. And so, leaving a city to flood, leaving a whole state to be pelted by environmental disasters caused in part by, large part by climate change, which is another level of failure. But that's not even it's barely a blip, right? While we're blowing up the world to increase everyone's energy prices, while we're trying to fight a war that we can't win, while there's just corruption that even strains the definition of corruption because it's just so out in the open. It's just people pilfering the country. The fact that they and of course we dismantled the health infrastructure in this country and the testing infrastructure and the food and drug making sure that we're not all like crapping our guts out when we eat some lettuce. We're dismantling that too. All of these failures should be like career-ending scandals on many levels, but it's actually just another day in 2026 America.
We've dismantled all the parts of government that are supposed to help us. If you look, you mentioned the Blackwater and like military component of coming into going into quote unquote help Katrina. Who is supposed to help in natural disasters? It's the National Guard. And our governor, Mike Braun, sent a bunch of our National Guard members to stand around protecting the empty or algae-filled reflecting pool in Washington, D.C., Jennifer. Like, there's no help when we need help. There's only punishment.
Are they still there?
I don't know if they are all still there or if we still have some there. I know there was about 300 Indiana National Guard members were sent to D.C. in December. I don't know if more have been rotated in or if it's other states or not. I was actually just looking for an update and couldn't find it. But you know what? My point still stands. Those are the people who should be nearby and available to deploy in an emergency like this. And I don't know if they're here or not. And that in and of itself is a problem.
That is because normally, like, I have no idea. I have not heard them brought up in the news. I don't know. Are they helping out with this up there in Gary? Does anybody know? Because usually you hear about them. Oh, the National Guard. They sent the National Guard. They sent this many people to our emergencies. But you're right. But that is part of everything that's going on, right? Like they are weakening every infrastructure in our country because the communication, the infrastructure, the money, the support, all of that, the power, what little power the average, community might have or average people. That's just part of the plan. Not only are they weakening it, it's also even harder to get the supports or the money or the help that you need, even if it's supposedly available.
Well, and then there's we've talked about it and touched on it a little bit. The extraction, right? The government, the public commons, the things that are supposed to benefit everybody are being sold off to private interests. Then you have the NIPSCO of it all up there in Gary, for example, Bryce. They've not been, apparently this lawsuit alleges they've not been doing things like tree maintenance to make sure that trees don't fall on power lines in the storms up there in Gary. Again, why are they not doing their maintenance in Gary? Well, we know why. But just they're probably under-resourced to perform those sort of things because that's not profitable. It's you can't extract maximum profit if you actually have sufficient staff to do preventative maintenance. You just wait till the disaster comes and hope the feds cover your ass.
Right. And I'm not an expert on Gary's utilities regime there, but as I understand it, they replaced a lot of the what would be public infrastructure, would be stuff that's run either at cost or at a loss for the public benefit. It's replaced with some private enrichment schemes that, well, they do work in the when things aren't in crisis mode, but when things go to crisis mode, they prioritize profits over the system actually functioning. And this is something that you see in a lot of infrastructure, a lot of industries today. I mean, we're going to be talking about Iran later. I mean, that's the story of the American military, right? They farm out a lot of their actual work to contractors who aren't interested in making things work. They're interested in making money for themselves. And so when it comes a time to for the system to be stress tested, it ends in disaster. And I think that this is just part and parcel of the hollowing out of the public sphere that is indicative of all of the neoliberal changes that have been going on over the last 40, 50 years. It's carving out the public infrastructure, replacing it with private. And when things go bad, well, it's the government that fails. So you privatize it more. And that way you can keep the wealth flowing upwards and keep the rich yacht people happy.
Yeah. Then it's a self-fulfilling doom loop.
Exactly. I saw something. I don't know. I think it was someone from either Braun's office was talking about one of the reasons that they were slow walking the response is that, I mean, they just don't believe that the government should be doing things like that. They believe that government isn't the solution to these things. It's kind of the old Reagan-esque mantra that what is it, the words that are the scariest words in the English language are "I'm the government and I'm coming to help you." A lot of people genuinely believe that. I mean, it's an ideological takeover of our country in the sense that all of these people now believe they're in government, but they now believe that government is the problem, and they're in there to dismantle it and to reject the duty to protect people.
Boy, I bet right about now there's a whole lot of people in Indiana who have bought into that "I'm from the government and I'm here to help" is the scariest words in the English language. I bet there's a whole lot of people in Indiana these last couple of weeks who wish there was someone from the government here to help.
Right.
So let's move on and go from talking about a natural disaster to a man-made disaster. Although if you want to blame climate change for last week's severe weather, it kind of is a man-made disaster, but that's neither here nor there. But so we'll talk about war and peace and Trump and Netanyahu's illegal and misguided war in Iran. We'll start there. Monday, a 60-day ceasefire between the two sides expired. Not that it had been terribly effective. Americans and Iranians had exchanged attacks several times during the 60-day window, and negotiations produced no long-term agreement. Now, thankfully, it has been a few weeks at this point without any fighting, but no further talks are planned. In fact, the only negotiations ongoing are between Iran and Oman to set up a system of control in the vital Strait of Hormuz, which will likely include tolls on a waterway that had been free before the war. On Monday, Trump threatened to bomb the shit out of Oman, a U.S. ally, if they, quote, get in the way. The bluster continued midweek with the president threatening what he called the most crushing economic operation ever against Iran, threatening sanctions on any country whose institutions, businesses, or ports provide Iran a lifeline, calling it a, quote, economic D-Day. The problem Iran has decades now of experience with U.S. economic warfare, and the regime has only grown more entrenched since the war. And the Islamic Republic can play at this game too. They've threatened to strike U.S. allies in the Persian Gulf if they join in on the Americans' economic pressure campaign. Plus, the pain cuts both ways, obviously. Americans are still feeling pinched at the pump, at the grocery checkout, and throughout the economy with oil prices remaining high. Jennifer, the Iranians are not scared. I think they dismiss everything Trump says, and I think Trump knows this. I think his bluster is mostly for the U.S. market, trying to project himself as strong going into these midterms. People are not buying it. His approval rating is now in the low 30s, and 80% of Americans expect this conflict to keep dragging on.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know. It just continues, and there's just whatever he says, there's just no value in it. Not, just for us, but across the world. I mean, how can you believe what he says? It changes by the moment, by the day. Very hard to negotiate. And this war right here is just, we're losing people, we're losing Americans. Not just at war, but at home, the economy is hard, and when things get worse like this, there's increased suicide rates. There's increased, problems in people's homes and communities, and it just continues to get worse and worse. So,
we very much in the way we were talking about, the short-term profits of things like NIPSCO a few minutes ago. We don't think of the long-term effects of things like going into war like this right now. Bryce, we're almost a full 6 months into this thing. Has anything been accomplished?
Yeah, actually, a lot has been accomplished. Iran successfully defended itself against a ridiculous attack, and they've also successfully pushed American military out of the bases that were surrounding the country, and they've asserted control over a critical strait. That the Americans and a lot of other countries around the world rely on. So a lot has been accomplished, just not in the way that the Trump administration and the Israelis wanted it to. I mean, remember, this war, not only was this a war that was a sneak attack against a sovereign country that's been largely peaceful and has never threatened the U.S. in any meaningful way, but it was a sneak attack during negotiations to avoid just this attack. And not only was it a sneak attack during negotiations to avoid this attack, it was the second one, because they did the exact same thing last year during the 12 Days War. And so if this war has proven anything, it's that you really can't make a deal with the United States. They're an unreliable partner. This is what China has found. This is what Russia has found. This is what Iran has found. This is what Cuba has found. This is what every country in the third world has found. And Trump, while it's easy to Trump wash this and say, Trump was the only one crazy enough to actually attack Iran. I mean, the Biden administration was making plans to do just this at the end of their administration. And one of the puzzle pieces that fell into place was during Biden's lame duck period, the government of Syria was overthrown by American-backed jihadis. And that's one of the reasons why the door is now open to attack Iran. So this has been a continuity of agenda from administration to administration, with a brief pause in the Obama years with the JCPOA. But, that was immediately thrown aside. It was working, and everyone acknowledged it was working. So, I mean, this is just, it's a cascade of failures, but it's a sign of an empire in distress. It's a sign of an empire that doesn't have the ability to plan, and that's captured by short-term hawkish interests. And I think that if the trends continue, I mean, earlier last week, they were talking about, who was this who released this? I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene actually was talking about how people told her that the Trump administration was talking about nuclear weapons. This is crazy. And this is coming at the same time that they're talking about reframing America's nuclear posture to use more, get this, usable nuclear weapons. They're talking about tactical nuclear weapons, things that they can actually use. If they're talking about actually using nuclear weapons, the game is over. People this isn't a rational conversation. This isn't defense. This is pure insanity. It's not just Trump who's demented. It's this entire rotting infrastructure of American militarism that's demented.
It's Nixon's madman theory on steroids. You mentioned Syria, and I guess I want to bring that up, and we'll stay in the region, and we'll talk about the U.S. partner who convinced Trump to join this war, who this week damn near started another one. So on Tuesday, Israel struck Syria's Abduhur air base in Idlib province, saying it aimed to prevent the deployment of Turkish troops there, in violation of a status quo agreement between the Israelis and the new Syrian government of Ahmad al-Shara. Turkey has been providing assistance to Syria's military and been rehabilitating the decommissioned base there, which hosted a Turkish delegation just hours before the strikes. Tensions between Israel and Turkey have been on the rise since the fall of the former Syrian government in late 2024, which you mentioned, with Netanyahu's government viewing Turkey, a U.S. NATO ally, mind you, as a threat in the region. U.S. envoy Tom Barrack says Israel didn't inform the Americans of the strike beforehand, and separately called into question the continued occupation of the Golan Heights, an area captured from Syria in 1967 and since annexed by Israel in contravention of the United Nations, but recognized by the U.S. Now, Turkey has not signaled an intent to respond to the strikes militarily, but did issue arrest warrants for Netanyahu and other Israeli officials on charges of genocide, crimes against humanity, and torture over Israel's May interception of the global Samud flotilla, and formally requested Interpol to pursue him internationally. Bryce, Israel views Turkey, again, a U.S. ally, as a threat in the region. They view everybody as a threat in the region. I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Israel is the threat in the region.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, it should be very clear to anyone who's been paying attention that Israel is by far the biggest threat to world peace in the Middle East, or at least a regional peace. The going after Turkey, I mean, this has been brewing for a little bit now. This greater Israel vision. It now includes Turkey as a major threat to that. Iran was the big threat. Traditionally in Israeli Zionist thought, it was that we have to defend ourselves against Iran and its proxies in the region, and there is a reason. There's a strategic reason why Israel would want Iran to be removed as a counterbalance to itself, right? If Israel wants to dominate the region, well, a regional power that could stop it makes sense. Turkey, the only interest that Turkey has in Israel is really kind of as a partner, as a partner in this domination of the U.S.-led domination of the Middle East. The disagreement seems to be about who's going to carve up Syria and how, and that to me is just, it's ridiculous. But the Turkish launching these allegations against Israel, or validating these charges against Israel by issuing arrest warrants, that's a very positive development. But we should be under no illusions. Turkey is no angel. I mean, Erdogan is a brutal, attacks on minorities, democratic backsliding, et cetera, et cetera. So he's no angel. But Turkey appears to be very reasonable here. The entire Syria situation originated from a joint U.S., Israeli, Saudi, and Turkish effort to fund Islamic jihadis and put up secular figures in the West to justify them, as a way to overthrow the Assad government, as a way ultimately to move towards war with Iran. This was laid out in the Bush administration and carried out during the Obama administration, continued during the Trump administration, and finished under the Biden administration. Again, this long continuity of agenda. And throughout that, Turkey and Israel have been very close allies. And Israel attacking Turkey or attacking Syria in this has been very interesting, because the current president of Syria, a guy named Ahmed al-Shara, it changed his name, but we'll go with his new name now. He actually was the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, and one of the commander of ISIS in Syria. And then after some rebranding and what clearly appear to be Western PR firms, he was able to rebrand himself as open and diversity and inclusion in the new Syria, all while massacring Alawites and things that weren't covered by the U.S. press. But throughout this time, they were pretty close with Israel. In fact, he was getting flamed from his own country, from his own countrymen. Why are you letting Israel annex Syria? Why are you letting Israel attack Syrian military institutions all around the country? And he said, well, Israel's a good ally, and we just seek to work with them nicely in the region, which is very strange. So to have Israel using that place as a battleground against Turkey is just a massive escalation that's unnecessary, not justified on any security grounds, but only justified on this insane world-dominating ideology that is Zionism. And I mean, that's how you get the push into Gaza. That's how you get the refusal to make peace with any of its neighbors. That's how you get the occupation of Syria. That's how you get this endless war against southern Lebanon. That's the ideology.
Jennifer, and Bryce mentioned it. There's sort of maybe kind of positive developments. I mentioned, Tom Barrack, the envoy there, said Israel didn't warn us in advance. He was kind of upset about this. He pushed back against the occupation of the Golan Heights, which the U.S. has been like the only place to recognize. We've seen recently in the last couple weeks, Mike Huckabee himself, like a Christian ultra-Zionist, say, the settlers in the West Bank need to cut it out. We've seen J.D. Vance push back on Israel. Like, is the U.S. government finally starting to get tired of their crap?
I think so. I remember in the last couple of weeks kind of picking up on that. I mean, I think just like so many things, our government goes into war or, trade wars with people and just they don't think things through. They just do not think what's going to happen on the other end. And they really help to contribute to this huge mess that's going on that, of course, has been, through all of eternity, a big mess and always never at peace there. But I mean, yes, I do. I do think that the government is waking up. I mean, everything's such a mess on all fronts. We're fighting at home. We're fighting with our neighbors. We're fighting with our allies, wherever they're at. We're, the Middle East, everywhere. And Israel is, a part of that as well. And we've been dragged into some of these wars because of our, obviously because of our support for Israel.
And I worry that with the right, the far right especially, starting to realize these things. Bryce mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you've got her teaming up with like Tucker Carlson and Thomas Massey offering a critique of Israel from the far right, and you worry that the Democrats are going to get holding the Israel bag. We'll talk about that more in a way in the second half of the show when we talk about this week's primaries. But I want to talk about some of the knock-on effects of this war in the Middle East, and last week, we talked about the plight of the service members aboard the USS Lincoln. That's an aircraft carrier. It had been stuck at sea for over 250 days without a single port call because of the bases that had been damaged, which Bryce mentioned earlier. Sailors aboard that ship had reported food and water shortages, plumbing issues, malfunctioning HVAC systems, and deteriorating mental health. Several individuals were reported to have jumped or attempted to jump overboard. This week, finally, potential relief as the USS Washington arrived in the area to tag out the Lincoln, with the beleaguered vessel now headed back home to San Diego. However, the Washington had been the last U.S. carrier deployed in the Western Pacific, potentially leaving U.S. allies in East Asia vulnerable. And along those lines, Trump ordered joint military exercises with South Korea to be substantially reduced, citing both Seoul's refusal to participate in the American war on Iran and his very good relationship with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Trump said the large annual military drills sent a signal that is totally appropriate and hostile to North Korea, a nuclear-armed state with which the U.S. has no formal diplomatic ties, but which Trump says has been unthreatening and respectful as long as he has been president. In response, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung called for his country to regain full operational control of its own military, which has essentially been under U.S. control since the 1950 to 53 Korean War. The South Koreans have been increasingly calling for command of their own forces for the last 2 decades. Jennifer, your thoughts?
I'm sorry. I was reading the message, so I missed all of that. Just gonna be honest. Pass.
Bryce, listen. The U.S. pulling its last aircraft carrier out of East Asia. Now, I'm no China hawk by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think they need to threaten their neighbors. The U.S.'s erratic behavior, like we've seen this week and with everything else under the Trump administration, will leave them walking right into China's open arms.
Well, I think that it's a positive development because of that. I think that any cooperation between neighbors is something to be encouraged and developed, and anything other than war is something that should be viewed as a rollback of the American policy of hyper militarizing South Korea and putting it on a war path, not only against the DPRK, but also it was meant to be used against China. And in fact, this cancellation of exercises, the Trump overtures to the Kim government, I think it's all a reversal of the Obama era pivot to Asia, which was originally designed to move American military focus out of the Middle East and out of Central Asia and into East Asia, because it was recognized that, well, we should probably try and figure out some sort of long-term solution in the Middle East. And we really got to take on the main rival, the main economic challenger to America's hegemony, which is China. That seems to have been completely derailed by the Israel business and the Ukraine business. All of this seems to be pulling American resources out of East Asia and putting it into, either Ukraine or in order to fight Russia, or putting it into Israel or similar enterprises in the Middle East to fight Iran and fight Iranian influence. Of course, it's doomed, but it does leave the door open for more positive developments in Korea. Now, South Korea has, like you said, been under military occupation effectively from the United States since the Korean War. But one of the big reasons that that's viewed positively in America is because there's such a caricature of North Korea, right? North Korea is viewed as this erratic, irrational hermit kingdom full of crazy people who are fanatically devoted to the great leader. Go to a MAGA rally if you really want to see that. But in reality, the North Koreans have been very pragmatic and very reasonable throughout their entire existence. And one of the reasons that they've been able to avoid complete destruction and invasion by the South and invasion by the West is because they developed a very sensible nuclear policy. They have nuclear weapons that they won't give up, but they're not using them aggressively. They say that we will only use them defensively. This has proven to be their golden ticket. And throughout insane American sanctions, throughout the war in the 1950s that wiped out a quarter of their population, it was really genocidal. Throughout a campaign of disinformation and lies and infiltration from the U.S., they've managed to actually pull off what the Wall Street Journal was describing as an economic miracle. This sorts of things are, and now that the U.S. is pulling out, the South Koreans are now talking about making peace with North Korea. This is brilliant. This is good. This is all positive. And in fact, the one Trump foreign policy thing that I think he got unfairly maligned for during his first term and is now getting attacked for this term is the fact that he's doing outreach to North Korea. Is that he's saying we want to make a deal. We want peaceful relations. Is this real? Only time will tell, but it's certainly better than trying to starve and isolate a country for no good reason.
Yeah. I question his motives. Certainly, I don't think the man's exactly any kind of peacemaker in chief. But Jennifer, I think a couple months ago when Trump went to China and talked to President Xi, mentioned the Thucydides trap, and it's sort of this international relations dynamic where the dying, weakening old power could potentially act irrationally like a corner rat in the face of a new emerging superpower. And she mentioned wanting to avoid the Thucydides trap and avoid war between the dying old empire, i.e. the United States, and China. And listen, hopefully we can emerge in some sort of world where everybody actually gets along and works toward humanity's good. I think the 8 billion plus of us on this orb floating through the universe need to work together because we've got bigger fish to fry, i.e. climate change.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as a behavior analyst, I know that things will continue on a trajectory. So things will unfortunately continue to get worse until something comes in and changes that trajectory. And unfortunately, whatever that something is probably not going to be a good thing.
I suspect it's going to be. Yeah, I think it's going to be external, right? Like there is no. One of the big worries about Trump's behavior in Iran that the Iranians are kind of coming to deal with is that even if there's a good, solid deal on the table that allows Americans to save face, good to have them leave and say we won, even if there is a deal that allows them to have the straits open or to have peace, world peace, they feel that it might be politically impossible in the United States for it to happen because our systems are just so cooked and our people in there are so cooked. I mean, we got 130-year-olds running the American Congress, and you have a 150-year-old as president. And there's a governing ideology and internal logic structures that reward the most hawkish behavior and that crowd out serious analysis. The Iranians are worried that it might just not be possible to make a deal with the U.S. If trends persist, the U.S. will continue to escalate over and over again until it ends in either nuclear war or the U.S. is no longer unable to do that, until there's an objective condition in which they are unable to act the way they are. We might be seeing that with the economy. We might be seeing that with, if China cuts off rare earth elements, for example, the U.S. military can't do anything about that. I mean, that's like game over. And if
the U.S. military, I'm not sure can do anything at this point, Bryce. I mean, we've they've gotten bent over a barrel by Iran in 6 months, and Iran is basically, their little $10,000 drones up against our multi-million-dollar missiles is the equivalent of throwing rocks on the military scale. And when we're getting our asses kicked, and frankly, we deserve it. Unfortunately, so it's you mentioned the economy. Let's talk about it. And this week, so I guess we'll start with the U.S. allies, and we mentioned South Korea and how our relationship has been affected with them, with Trump and his cozying up to Kim Jong-un. Well, pissing off our allies is something that can also be done closer to home. A trade deal with Canada that the president said was as good as done on Tuesday had fallen apart by Saturday, triggering a 50% tariff on over $20 billion in Canadian goods and threatening over $1 trillion in integrated North American trade. U.S. officials say Canada tanked the deal with last-minute demands. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney blames internal U.S. disunity, pointing to friction between U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who reportedly felt the deal framework was sprung on his agency, despite touching issues he oversees. Now, Carney is drawing bipartisan Canadian support for walking away, including from his conservative rival Pierre Poilievre and Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who called the draft a terrible deal. Canada plans retaliatory tariffs on U.S. steel, dairy, appliances, and other goods starting on September 8th. Jennifer, listen, the Canadians are notoriously like the world's nicest people. If you've pissed off the Canadians, you're really showing your ass.
Do you know that I was born in Canada?
I was not aware of that.
Yep. My dad was there coaching basketball, but I'm also French Canadian by blood. So yeah, it's just ridiculous. Picking on the Canadians. They have been our allies, our support. For at least 250 years. And it's not getting any better. It's just this example with this whole thing falling through with the trade is just what we were talking about. Trump's word means nothing, because at the end of the day, he changes his mind. He changes the goal. That's the thing. The goalpost keeps getting changed, whether it's here in our country or with our allies, with war, and everything that we are talking about today is just weakening our country's infrastructure, our standing, within the world. And just
it's not
we
great.
need to do better. It needs to do. It's just on all sides. As somebody living and breathing in the middle of our country, all of these things weigh on us, whether or not we're paying attention to what's going on, or we're just paying attention to the prices at the gas station or the grocery store, which is just outrageous. And on top of that, something that we're not talking about, and I'm sorry, I think I just changed this topic a little bit, is layoffs. Layoffs are coming. I'm hearing about layoffs from a lot of people, and that is, obviously a reflection of what's going on with the economy. I spoke with a friend of mine this week, and her 3 adult children had all been laid off within a 2-week period. And it's also hitting our healthcare. It's hitting other sectors that are not typically have as many layoffs, when the economy is bad. So all of these things worry us, because obviously we need steel. We need a lot of those things at good prices from our Canadian neighbors.
Well, yeah, and this petulance is affecting everyday Americans at the grocery store, at the gas pump, with all of our goods that go over the Canadian border and stuff. Bryce, I'm old enough to remember going over the Canadian border myself without a passport. My mom grew up in Western New York, and we'd go visit family. We'd go through Canada, and now not only do you need a passport to go through and visit Canada, Trump's threatening a war with the Canadians.
No, it's just absolutely insane. I mean, this tariff business from the start. I mean, you saw what was it called? Liberty Day, Freedom, whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just Liberation Day.
Liberation Day.
When they announced all these tariffs, and of course the companies, they don't pay the tariffs. They just pass the cost on to the customers. But over the last few months, we're starting to see billions and billions of dollars being refunded to the corporations, $0 being refunded to the people. Turns out the whole thing was a scheme cooked up to, shock the markets, but also just transfer more billions of dollars of wealth to these corporate balance sheets, which then affects their stock price, which then a rising tide lifts all yachts. But, I don't have a yacht. So do you have a yacht?
The rising tide lifts the yachts and drowns the rest of us.
And drowns the rest of us.
Yes, Liberation Day liberated Americans from their money and gave it all to the billionaires. Speaking
and the tariff
of
fight,
which,
the tariff fight is just a continuation of that. I mean, it's just there was no economic reason for the tariffs. They're not protecting any industry that's going to then be supercharged by billions of dollars of American investment. No, it's just petty nonsense. And the fact that they couldn't make a deal with Canada, even though, the MAGA version of this, so that the tariffs were just a negotiating chip, a bargaining chip, so that you can renegotiate great trade deals with our neighbors. Well, they don't even want to do that. They don't even want to do that. And I don't know if it's like malice or if it's incompetence, but it doesn't really matter at this point. I mean, the result is the same. High tariffs, high prices, more inflation, less security, less good relations with our neighbors, and more wealth transferring upward. This is the name of the game.
What do they say? Never assign to malice what can be explained by incompetence. Why not both? It's both. I'm pretty sure. So decades of bloated military budgets and tax cuts for billionaires and economic mismanagement, see above, have sent the U.S. national debt now above $40 trillion this week for the first time. Long-term uncertainty about the state of the U.S. economy sent the 30-year Treasury over 5% for the first time in nearly 20 years, and a skittish bond market caused Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to announce a round of emergency debt buyback. It's not just the U.S. that has investors worried. The entire Western capitalist market economy faces uncertainty. Japan's 10-year bond hit a 30-year high. France's 30-year yield hit a post-2008 high. And Germany's 30-year bond hit its highest since 2011. Governments funding ambitious spending plans, and tech giants like Alphabet and Microsoft borrowing heavily for AI infrastructure are all competing for the same limited pool of capital, pushing the price of borrowed money higher across the board. Now, my contention is this: the top line number itself doesn't matter. The U.S. government, as a sovereign currency issuer with its own central bank, is not in danger of running out of money. It is inflation, not solvency, that is the real constraint. And on that front, there are real concerns. Rising treasury yields ripple directly into mortgage rates, corporate borrowing, and other consumer costs, worsening affordability problems economy-wide. Jennifer, listen, the bond stuff, I don't fully get all that, but what I do see is that the capitalism is sort of reaching its ability to extract, and the investor class is like, oh crap, where are we going? Where's the next growth market? I don't know if there is one. At least that's kind of how I'm seeing it.
I mean, it still seems there's a lot of development going on. I think that's where growth is, where money is. People, all the projects that are happening. I mean, I live in Southern Indiana, and there's so much money going through there with investors and developers, bonds. We were talking about that early on, which is not I think the best subject for both of us. But inflation, one of the big issues with inflation is not only is it costing more now and people are struggling, but things are not going to go down. Prices are not going to, some prices fluctuate, obviously gas and, certain things fluctuate. But once a company has raised its price on something, they're very unlikely to reduce it. So it just keeps going on this trajectory.
Bryce, are you concerned about the debt? Does the $40 trillion mean anything to you?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think you mentioned, or you put in the notes a while ago about the MMT view of all of this, because it's a lot of the times, but especially before I started learning about the economy in a deep level, you would hear debt, and you would hear these numbers being thrown around. You would hear stuff about inverted yield curves and what does it mean to have a 5% interest rate on a 30-year bond? But all of this is just a simple way of saying that the people who fund the U.S. debt are feeling a lot, to use Trump's word, yippy. They're feeling more yippy about the ability of the U.S. Yeah, they're feeling concerned about the ability for the U.S. to pay these debts back, even though, since we're a monetarily sovereign nation, we could just print the money to pay it back. But this is because of the political uncertainty. We're talking about the threat of de-dollarization, which is happening slowly. The Belt and Road Initiative, and the Chinese, the Chinese economic sphere, they're starting to convert their sales into RMB, the renminbi, the Chinese yuan, which does have a short or long-term threat to U.S. dollar supremacy, but nothing in the immediate term. The $40 billion debt number is really just an accounting figure, but it shows that we're spending more than we're taking in. That's all fine and good, but the problem is that we're spending it on nothing useful, right? We're not spending it on anything that's going to last generations. We're spending it on financial mechanisms and trickery in order to inflate the capital stock, the stock prices of these corporations. That's just a wealth transfer from the many to the few. But these corporations that are getting enriched, they're not building anything. They're not building out a new high-speed rail system for America. They're not building out a bunch of free hospitals. They're not investing in communities. They're not building out like towers of housing so people can live for generations to come. They're just inflating their own stock. They're just military corporations are building complicated boondoggles that may or may not ever work. But the people who are building it, they get to have a new house in Northern Virginia or whatever. That's what the problem is. It's just a complete waste of our sovereign, our monetary sovereignty to be using our money like this. Other countries can, if they're running a deficit, they're usually doing it to do something, right? They're doing it for a purpose. We can benefit our population with this project. Okay, good. That'll give gains in the future. If we're inflating NVIDIA's stock price so that they can make more money by selling GPUs to the data centers that are then going to make money by selling artificial intelligence, general artificial intelligence to save the world and cure cancer. I mean, it's just like, smoke. It's just nonsense. That's just bad monetary and economic policy.
It's like a big shell game. I like to explain the whole thing like this. The debt as it is, the $40 trillion is really, that's the size of the U.S. money supply. It is money that has not been pulled back into the system through taxation. And I like to think of it like a fountain, like a pump, or like the human circulatory system, right? Okay, we've got, the economy is big. It needs this much money flowing through it, this much blood, right, flowing through it. And what the problem is that we have a clot. All of the money is gathered in the billionaire class, and it is not being sufficiently pulled back in through the government and then pushed back out to the lower ends of the economic system, to the people, where it then gets spent back into small businesses, into big businesses, and so on and so forth, and keep things moving. Well, we're having like a stroke or a heart attack. Like, all of the money is there being hoarded by a handful of billionaires and isn't actually doing anything meaningful, to your point. And so we talked about the sovereignty issue, right? And Bryce brought up the potential for de-dollarization, and it is slowly happening over time. And a less dollar-dominated world would mean things like higher borrowing costs across the board, not just for the public debt, but for mortgages and auto loans and business credit too, since dollar demand currently keeps rates artificially low. And losing reserve status would also mean losing the U.S.'s sanctions leverage. To Bryce's point, nearly all international money movement currently touches the U.S. banks, giving Washington power to cut off adversaries from the global finance that would disappear without dollar dominance. And you mentioned things like the Chinese renminbi. We're already starting to see this happen. Ships are paying yuan to get through the Strait of Hormuz. But again, as long as the U.S. maintains its status as a sovereign issuer of its own currency, we maintain the ability to spend on whatever we can marshal the resources to implement. The real danger is giving up that power to a non-government issued currency like crypto. And the world's worst people are playing the long game to eventually remove the world's money supply from democratic oversight. And this week, Trump appointed federal regulators granted preliminary approval to the Trump family-backed crypto firm World Liberty Trust to act as a bank, a move Senator Elizabeth Warren called, quote, the most brazen act of self-dealing our financial system has ever seen. Jennifer, what could go wrong?
Everything. I mean, this government is not good with money as it is. I mean, everything they try to invest in, all these vanity projects are just they don't seem to go anywhere except cost us more and more money. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, Trump has been able to do whatever he wants. I mean, play with our money, have people pay tons of money every month to get insider information or get information first before the rest of us do. I mean, I guess it'll work out. It'll work out for the people that already have all the money. They'll continue to, extract more and more money from Americans. So I guess
the Trump family being sovereign currency issuers themselves, again, it can only go poorly. I mean, the man bankrupted multiple casinos. How do you lose money as a casino? The house always wins.
No, this crypto stuff. I mean, I thought I was done hearing about crypto for a while. I kind of thought that the great Donald J. Trump rug pull of 2025 was crypto's last gasp. But that is not to be. The idea of crypto being sanctioned as like a currency is, I mean, kind of horrifying, because one of the dangerous things about the dollar, and going back to this dollarization regime, is that most countries around the world have to deal with the fact that the dollar is the world's reserve currency. I can't remember who it was, but I think it was either a president of the Treasury or a president of the CIA or something like that. They said that the dollar is our currency, but it's your problem. Talking you being the rest of the countries in the world, because of the deal that the U.S. made with the oil cartels to denote the energy sales in dollars. So that means if you're Paraguay and want to get some energy, you have to find dollars to make that transaction, right? You have to go out and trade your currency for dollars, and then you use those dollars to buy oil or whatever. If the U.S. controls the monetary supply, well, then that means your entire economy is based on the U.S. monetary supply. And this is a way to undermine the sovereignty. Transferring this power to these freak tech bros, trying to allow crypto to be used as a kind of currency in the same way the dollar is just ill-conceived. It makes sense if you're just like trying to launder all the money and trying to enrich a few people and trying to break the world's economy and once again get yourself a yacht. It makes perfect sense, but as monetary policy, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it is, I think, what was it El Salvador who made El Salvador, who made Bitcoin a legal tender for a time. It was either Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. Hey, it didn't work out very well because that's insane. And the fact that anyone thinks that this is a good idea, and I don't think these people do think it's a good idea. I think they don't care and they just know that they can get money. But the fact that anyone's going along with it is just, again, an example of the complete decay of the American institutions.
It's about removing any kind of democratic oversight from the monetary system, and
there wasn't a lot to begin with.
Right? Yeah, no, they're independent, but still, elected officials appoint them, and you've got maybe twice removed, but there's still a modicum of democratic oversight. In a crypto world, there is none. So let's change topics here as we've come to the bottom of the hour and our halfway point in this week's show. And 3 states held primaries on Tuesday, and 1 held a special election. But I want to start way out in Alaska, where incumbent Senator Dan Sullivan and former Congresswoman Mary Peltola advanced to November's general election. She was the top vote getter in the state's open, nonpartisan top 4 primary, also advancing Dan J. Sullivan, who finished a far distant third after the senator tried to have the same named challenger removed over alleged foul play. We saw a situation similar to this in the Indiana State Senate earlier this year. But anyway, the Alaska Supreme Court there ruled in the lesser Sullivan's favor and left him on the ballot, leaving formatting up to state elections officials. Now, Cook Political report has shifted this race from a toss-up, partly due to the name confusion risk, with recent polling showing Peltola leading the incumbent Sullivan by 6 points, even before accounting for potential vote splitting from the second Sullivan. Potential shenanigans aside, though, what I really want to talk about here is Alaska's unique voting system. According to Unite America, Alaska's top 4 nonpartisan primary plus ranked choice general, adopted by voters in 2020 and first used in 2022, appears to have boosted competition and participation, per this pro-reform group's analysis. Alaska led the nation with 35% of eligible voters casting, quote, meaningful votes, nearly triple the national average, and gained the right to vote for any candidate, regardless of party, for the first time since 2000. Uncontested state legislative races fell to half the 2020 rate, and half of all contests featured intra-party competition for the first time under the new system. Representation shifted too. 23% of the legislature was people of color. After 2022, more women ran for office than in the previous 5 cycles combined, and independents now hold 10% of legislative seats. Jennifer, I want to see Indiana and every state, frankly, adopt such a system.
Yeah, it's awesome. I only followed this story a little bit. I didn't know, everything that you talked about, but that's great. I mean, could you imagine voter rights? I mean, first nonpartisan and ranking. I mean, and that gives a lot of people chances, different people, like I said, Black people, brown people, women, they have a better chance. And also, we know just even within our own parties, there's a lot of gatekeeping. So I think this can as well help with that. So I think it's great. Now the is it Sullivan? Was he the guy that decided to run?
Which one?
Well, I don't know. Like, because is one person already in office?
Yes, Dan. I want to say
Dan
Sullivan is the incumbent,
one. So I think I briefly had heard that the other guy just decided to run because of his name, and he was so pissed off at what the other person was or wasn't doing. I don't know if that's true, but that's what's stuck in my head. So it can definitely.
And hey, listen, more power to him. It's called democracy, you know. But and I want to say the breakdown of this election. Peltola, who again, with former U.S. Congresswoman from Alaska, they've got an unusual situation there. It's one of these low population states that only has one representative, but 2 senators. And, you know, so she's shown the ability to win statewide. And she finished first in this race Tuesday with like 46 or something % of the vote. And wow. Sullivan also had somewhere in the high 40s. The third and fourth place finishers only had low single digits each. So I don't know how much this name confusion is going to matter. Although in a really close election in November, it could. But to your point, Jennifer, you know, you mentioned the gatekeeping, and what Bryce mentioned earlier, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson, and sort of the dynamics on the right, where you've got the sort of anti-Trump faction forming, and you've still got nominally moderate Republicans out there as well. On the Democratic side, we talk about this here all the time, and we'll talk about it again here shortly. The fight between progressives and conservatives. I think a top 4 open primary like this would lend itself toward a more multi-party system, sort of break the 2-party duopoly. It will lend itself to, I think, 4 major parties eventually forming out of whatever mess we have now. Bryce, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I want to run back to this primary system that you were talking about. As I understand it, it's like the first 4 past the post get.
It's just the top 4 finishers move on to the general, and then the general is ranked choice voting. Yeah.
So this very obviously just makes more sense than you know these closed or open primaries that we have, and it's like a very easy solution to some of the democratic ills. And I was reading, or I was reading about it like a couple days ago when you put it in the notes, and I think it's a very interesting way to approach this question of democracy, because is it really democracy if you're just picking the worst out of however many options? It doesn't really make sense for people to have no access to the primary system, have no access to the pre-primary system, but then only to have 2 candidates just selected for you, and then you pick between the 2. No, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think the results that you're talking about speak volumes about what that can actually do. I don't know much about Alaska's policy. I don't know much about the like the outcomes, but the makeup of the Congress that or the legislature that you were talking about is very encouraging. And I'm pretty sure that we can get Governor Mike Braun to sign this into law if we just try hard enough and ask hard enough. I mean, I don't know. Do you know of any organizations that are working towards election reform in Indiana? Because I mean, there's probably a big slate of things that you could do, but it seems like they would just run into the wall of the supermajority and then be banging their head against the wall. But I don't know. Do you know anything like that?
It's certainly you're gonna need folks elected into the legislature who would voluntarily dilute their own power.
Right, like you're asking them to make themselves weaker. But it happened. I mean, in Alaska, was it a public referendum?
I would say it was a public
in 2020.
Got this thing on the board, and so then you've got that problem where we don't even have that option in Indiana. Our legislature banned ranked choice voting this year. The one thing you do sort of have is that group Independent Indiana. You've got the Greg Ballard running for Secretary of State this year under this new Lincoln party, which, at least if they get ballot access going forward, could provide another option. I don't know what the ceiling is on something like that, but it's something. There are things going on, but yeah, we do run into a lot more headwinds here, not having things like citizens ballot initiatives or referendums that can be brought forward by the people of the state, which could theoretically lead to a system like this, which, my God, we desperately need.
But change things so much. I mean, it would be interesting to see what our state would look like if that was available to voters. And
listen, I'm progressive. I'm pretty far out there. Bryce would probably call me a centrist, but I think we could all get behind something like this. It does, you find, have ranked choice voting in general, but a system like this has a moderating influence. You get folks elected into office that are more acceptable to broader swaths of the population and less extremes. And then if you can focus on policy, I think in the long term, though, more progressive policies are popular with the people, and that would eventually win out. So I do want to talk about the other results from Tuesday in Wyoming. Itself a pretty red state, far-right so-called Freedom Caucus members there lost several primaries to more moderate, again, words doing a lot of work, Republican challengers, a mirror image of what happened here in our state in May. Though, to be fair, the far right still won at the federal level, with Chuck Gray winning their GOP U.S. House nomination and incumbent Senator Harriet Hagman easily winning her re-election primary. But in Wyoming's gubernatorial race, Trump's pick, State Superintendent of Public Instruction Megan Degenfelter, lost to State Senator Eric Barlow in the Republican primary. Barlow, a fourth-generation rancher, campaigned on public lands protection, school funding, and rural health care, popular kind of liberal policies, honestly, in overcoming attacks from Degenfelter and outside groups who branded him as too liberal. In Florida, though, Trump endorsed Byron Donalds, easily won the GOP nomination for governor there, seeking to become the state's first black governor. He will face former Republican turned Democrat David Jolly in November. Democrats there have not occupied the governor's mansion since the 1990s. At the congressional level, two Trump-backed candidates lost their GOP primaries. We've seen more of this over the last several weeks, including scandal-plagued incumbent Corey Mills. On the Democratic side, corporate Democrats fended off progressive challengers in two hotly contested races. AIPAC-backed incumbent Jared Moskowitz defeated Democratic Socialist Oliver Larkin in the 25th district, while former DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was drawn out of her old district, carpetbagged into the majority-minority 20th, fending off a crowded field of black candidates, including DSA-aligned Elijah Manley. And we'll get to the Florida Senate race in a moment, but Bryce, I want your thoughts on these congressional contests first.
Well, I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of change in the U.S. Congress, like on the horizon. Like, these aren't races or places that I even follow closely. But the fact that people are pushing for this kind of change, flipping districts that haven't been flipped in forever, flipping states that haven't been flipped in forever. I think that this is, on some level, I do have to give some Democrats some credit sometimes, and that they're, a lot of them are getting off of their ass and really pushing and trying to seize the moment. But I think that the primary reason that they're doing this is because of a lot of the failures that we've been talking about, in the rest of the show. The fact that the economy is going kaput. People are getting kicked off of Medicare. People are getting kicked off of this. The salmonella is now around the corner. You got alpha-gal up in the woods.
There's glass in the popsicles, Bryce.
There's glass in the popsicles, and people are starting to wonder. Well, can we do something about this? Do we still have to? Do we have to live like this? And the answer is no. But since we live in a two-party system, it's the Democrats who are in the position to, swoop in and say, "I'm the savior. I'm going to fix things." And maybe they're usually wrong. They usually don't mean it. But in this case, I think it's motivating a lot of real serious people to get out there and run for office, to work on campaigns, to start campaigning about these issues that we all care about. And I don't like being predicting the blue wave or whatever, because that's always inviting bad karma onto it. But I think it's a foregone conclusion that, and it seems to me that the Trump administration has also concluded this, that there's going to be some serious shifts in the Congress. And I think that if the socialist wave continues with, the red wave, I guess we need new names for these things. But if that continues, then that gives serious progressives the opportunity to band together, act as a bloc, and to, you still don't control the presidency after 26, but you do have the ability to call investigations. You have the ability to launch impeachment hearings. You have the ability to, and impeachment not just against the president, but against the whole of government, like the judiciary, the cabinet people. Like, they have the ability to do this, and if they are putting together a plan, which I hope they're doing, to do this in the most efficacious way possible, I think that we are setting the stage for decent change. I don't want to oversell it, right? This is still the United States of America, where good ideas go to die. But this is there is an opportunity for decent change, or at least setting the stage for something more serious after 28. Who's to say? But I'm cautiously optimistic. Might be too strong of a word, but yeah, I'll say optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic that fewer bad things are on the horizon. If
I certainly I don't get a lot of hope from the Moskowitzes and Wasserman Schultz and Jollies of the world. Well, there is a glimmer in Florida. We'll talk about her in a moment. But yes. Jennifer, I wanted to talk about this the dynamic, like what happened in Wyoming. We saw their far right lost a lot of folks to more, again, quote unquote, moderate Republicans out there. The opposite of what happened here in Indiana in May, where we saw 6 or 7, depending on the results of a court fight, which is still ongoing here, about 70 days out from the election, of our incumbent state senators get ousted by MAGA far right radicals that were propped up by Trump and Jim Banks.
I think it's just at the point where no matter what you live, what is going on is undeniable. And the fact that it is what the policies that are happening, whether it's, state, federal, they are affecting people's pocketbooks, and that affects people no matter where you are income wise. So I think a lot more people are very much waking up. Plus just seeing, all these projects of Trump's wasting all of this money when we literally have people starving. We do. I mean, I see so much more things coming across, like on Facebook, with people looking for food just to make it, through the day or through the weekend. But I am actually surprised and very happy about, all these progressive candidates. They really help to motivate other candidates, other people who, just need to see some people succeed, that can motivate them as well to stand up for their community, run, help other people. I think it will be very interesting on election night to see what the makeup is of, our federal government and state government. Will be very interesting. But no matter what happens, I don't think it's going to be an easy road. I mean, nothing has been easy underneath this president at all. So I guess we'll see. But it's good news.
I want to talk about one of those folks on the progressive left that gives me some hope. And in Florida's Democratic Senate primary, Democratic Socialist Angie Nixon overcame a mountainous fundraising advantage by retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, winning by a comfortable 12 points despite being outraised at least 16 to 1. She ran on an explicitly progressive platform: Medicare for all, a $25 minimum wage, universal child care, and cutting off unconditional U.S. aid to Israel. Vindman largely ignored Nixon, focusing on attacking the incumbent Republican Ashley Moody, and he caught a reputation as an aloof, out-of-state plant. Nearly 80% of Nixon's donors were Floridian versus only a third of Vindman's. Now, if she wins in November, it is an uphill battle. Nixon would be the first black U.S. senator from Florida. Jennifer, it really goes to show, I mean, she was outspent 16-1. We saw a couple weeks ago in Michigan, Abdul al-Sayed was outspent like 11-1, a bunch of AIPAC money in both races. But it really goes to show that money can do a lot, but in the end, people power can win.
Right. Yeah. And, you're talking about where all that money comes from. Even if that money comes from out of state, out of country, it's still the voters in that state that are going to vote. That's also why it's so important to go door knocking, which I'm not good at myself, but I do recommend to other people. Again, people just, they know what's going on. I mean, they feel it every single day. And if they're not feeling it, parents are feeling it through their adult children, their grandchildren, their older parents. So, I think people across this country are much more aware of, waking up to, we've got to do something. We've got to support candidates that are talking about what is going on in the everyday American citizens' lives.
100%. Now, Bryce, last week, Wisconsin, Francesca Hong, a DSA-aligned candidate, narrowly, like 4,000 votes out of
barely
near 800,000, lost her race. And despite Peggy Flanagan, the more progressive candidate, winning in Minnesota on the same night, by a lot, mind you, excuse me, the pundits declared the DSA dead, right, with Hong's one loss. And yet here we are, Florida, of all places, a progressive black woman. They also always like to paint DSA as like a bunch of like trust fund white kids. And me, I'm seeing out here, you got Angie Nixon, you got Cori Bush, Nina Turner was always involved there. I mean, like AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. Like, I don't know what they're seeing, but I think their pronouncements of the progressive movement and the democratic socialist movement in this country dead a little bit premature.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And, I'm sure everyone here has seen the joke where, if a progressive wins by a wide margin, it's like, oh, well, we'll see. They'll have to come to the center to make anything real happen. But if a progressive loses by, a small margin, it's, the tombstone for the movement. But this is just the way that corporate media are, of course, liable to talk about serious progressive issues. Francesca Hong did a great showing, great candidate, and had a great vision. And she set herself up to be a significant political force, maybe all over the country. And the declaration of the death of DSA, I mean, it's just utter nonsense. The DSA has more members than it ever has, and the number is continuing to grow. I mean, here in Bloomington, our chapter, you and I, Scott, our chapter has grown by almost 500% over the last 18 months. 500%, and that number is going to keep going up. We have a Nixon to rally behind, and I think that I think that her win is a sign that the DSA movement isn't just some nationally top-down thing where a few fringe people in different areas of the country get excited and maybe they win an election in super liberal New York. I think it proves that this movement and these ideas have staying power beyond whatever the national media says. Because, like you mentioned, 80% of her donors were from Florida. A lot of the times with DSA candidates, they get national attention and they're bolstered by this national network of left-wingers and progressives. This doesn't seem to be the case here. And I didn't even hear about Miss Nixon until she won. Like, I didn't even know her name. I didn't even know that this race was going on and that there was a DSA person, poised to be able to perhaps win. The fact that this went on in Florida, which is, basically, Tartarus of America. The fact that this happened in there is extremely heartening. You have some of the victories that you don't really want to, cheer on. You have Debbie Wasserman Schultz and other things, but I think it is a sign that maybe Florida is trying to claw its way back out of crazy land and you have someone serious who represents genuine working class interests. Now, on the left wing, there's been a lot of, grousing about a recent interview where she declared that she was a capitalist, which, I guess I get. If you're running as a DSA candidate, maybe don't go out there and say you're a capitalist. It's not a good look. But if you look at her actual politics, I mean, they're really just Elizabeth Warren politics. Social democrat, democratic socialist. It's certainly further to the left than anyone than any policy consensus in Washington today, and that should be cheered on. That should be encouraged. But I do think that we do want to get on message as much as possible.
Yeah, and to your point, Bryce, Florida is an uphill battle, as I said, and they've not had a Democrat win statewide in quite some time. But the last time they came close was in 2018, when Andrew Gillum narrowly lost to Ron DeSantis for governor. That was DeSantis's first run. Yeah, that's the closest they've come in a while. Gillum ran as a progressive, and it took some dirty tricks for DeSantis to win that race. So hopefully Florida Democrats will learn their lesson, and we'll see more Gillum, more Nixon, and less Wasserman Schultz and Moskowitz. A couple last notes before we change gears from elections. So you mentioned turning the crazy down in Florida, and voters in Sarasota County there certainly did so, ousting much of their arch-conservative school board. That, remember, is where the Moms for Liberty movement began, and the incumbents associated with that group were defeated by newcomers focused on depoliticizing the board and moving past culture war grievances. We will talk more about education later in the show through an Indiana lens. Finally, on Tuesday, back out west in California, another progressive, State Senator Aisha Wahab, won a special election for the seat previously held by disgraced former Congressman Eric Swalwell. Once favored to win in a landslide, Wahab only narrowly won after, again, AIPAC-aligned groups poured roughly $4 million into ads backing her opponent, Melissa Hernandez, late in the race. Wahab is the first Muslim elected to California's state Senate. She campaigned on health care, child care affordability, and curbing corporate price gouging. She'll serve only through the end of this Congress, with a November rematch against Hernandez already set for the full 2-year term. Now, I mentioned the culture wars, and I want to turn there because Indiana has become a bit of ground zero for one of the fronts on the culture wars. Now, Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham has become a darling of the right wing, telling ESPN she wants to, quote, protect young girls in sports from, quote, biological men. Again, this is despite no known trans athlete ever having played in the WNBA, and the number of trans athletes playing at any level, minuscule. We will come to that. The Fever have Indiana's WNBA team have become the team of choice for the right, with straight white players like Cunningham and their star, Caitlin Clark, standing in contrast to a largely black and queer league. Rallies both for and against trans women in sports have popped up wherever the Fever have played on the road. Chicago, Seattle, Portland, Las Vegas, and Minnesota, where Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve has publicly worn a Trans Kids Belong shirt and called it a, quote, human rights issue. And Cunningham was booed throughout that game. Two former washed-out NBA players, Enes Kanter and Royce White, are undertaking a stunt, declaring themselves eligible for the 2027 WNBA draft, saying they identify as women, and this topic has now become an issue in Indiana's crowded Secretary of State's race. Again, despite trans rights having nothing to do with the duties of the office, Republican nominee Max Engling attacked Lincoln Party candidate Greg Ballard for saying Indiana's 2022 transgender girls sports ban was, quote, unnecessary. Correctly, I may add. Ballard had supported then-Governor Holcomb's veto of the bill at the time, which the GOP legislature then overrode. Ballard stood by his original position on WIBC radio, framing it as a less government Republican principle. Democrat Bo Bai sided with the existing ban, calling the controversy a non-issue since the law is already in place, while he did fairly pivot to broader anti-discrimination protections for transgender Hoosiers in housing, voting, and jobs. But the alignment cuts against expectations. Here you have Ballard running as a centrist third-party alternative, outflanking the Democrat on the left, staking out a more permissive position of the three candidates on the underlying policy, while By's explicit support for the ban has drawn criticism from progressive Democrats on social media who see it as capitulation to the far right. Jennifer, your thoughts?
I don't. I'm trying to follow all this. I think when we were kind of looking at what we were talking about before the show started, it's like, why are we talking about this? I think, some of this is like, it doesn't really have anything to do with the NBA. It's just one of those words. It seems like it is an issue for some people, but it's a continuation of the culture wars. And I think this, for some people, especially on the right, can really grab at them. And
Bryce, to Jennifer's point, this is largely it's an issue that's made to be something by folks on the far right who have seen their racism become toxic over the last 50 years, who have seen their homophobia become toxic over the last 30 years.
Oh, I wish this were
who
so.
Now need to reach for a new other to attack. Now, Bo, listen, and I'm not going to attack Bo on his donors or on his name or on anything. Just from a strategy point, you call the Republicans weirdos for focusing on this. You say trans women are women. You say we can deal with these issues on a case-by-case basis since there's one of them in Indiana every year, and you be done with it. You don't say you support the ban.
That was surprising for me. I thought that people were on the same page, that this issue is a manufactured non-issue, and to the extent that you're going to engage with it all, you protect the dignity of people you claim to care about. I mean, that's the simple thing. I mean, I'm not a sports guy. I don't really have an opinion about who should be playing sports. In fact, maybe no one should be playing sports. I hear they're very bad for you sometimes. But but the reason that they had the transgender ban isn't because they care that trans people are playing sports. Trans people have probably been playing sports for years before Fox News told them to care about it. They do this because there are foundations, there's billions of dollars funded into, or at least hundreds of millions of dollars funded into culture war institutions designed to make these issues more salient in the news media, in elections, and in personal conversations. This was the same exact thing with critical race theory, right? I believe it was the Manhattan Institute that was one of the champions of putting critical race theory into the zeitgeist as something that we either have to be for or against. And so it's all nonsense. What even is critical race theory? But one of the impresarios of that movement, Christopher Rufo, he said straight up, he said, well, people don't really care about critical race theory, but I can capture a lot of their anxieties about the changing world and scapegoat a group of people by calling this critical race theory. And if we make that an issue, then people will care about it. Republicans sound like they're defending, traditional values, and that helps them electorally, which helps the Republican agenda writ large. It's the exact same thing with any sort of anti-trans activism. It's not organic. People don't really care about this stuff, and at least to the extent that they do care about it, people have traditional views on things, but they certainly don't care about it more than they care about feeding their kid or sending their kid off to a stupid war in Iran, having their energy prices go up, having the inability to trust any greens that you buy from the store. I think people care about those things a lot more than whether the children's genitals while they're playing sports. The fact that this has become such a big issue, the fact that we're even talking about it now, it really just shows that they have triumphed in some way, and that they have triumphed in putting this as an agenda item. Now, what you were talking about with the fever, that is stuff I didn't even know about. They have anti-trans. What do you say? There are anti-trans rallies where the fever is playing around the country. This is
both for and against. Yeah, you've got counter protests popping up. Yeah, like I said, the Fever have become the darlings. Sophie Cunningham is like their new MAGA Barbie doll because she, spouts their anti-trans line. And I wanted to highlight somebody who I think handled this question the best way possible. We're talking about strategy and the way you turn this thing on the heads of the Republicans who are focused on this weirdo stuff and not the stuff that really matters to people. Natasha Baker's running for state senate up there in District 22. That's like Tippecanoe and Carroll counties, I believe. And on Facebook, she laid out a very nice argument. I will link it in the show notes, pointing out that if you want to protect women in sports, look at the coaches. You look at Larry Nassar with USA Gymnastics. There's a coach in the National Women's Soccer League, and a guy at San Jose State, among others. Not to even mention the folks at the youth levels. It's men, actual men, who have consistently been perpetrating abuse of girls and women in coaching roles and medical roles. It's not trans athletes. There are zero cases of trans athletes or coaches or anybody harming women in sports. Baker contends that abuse is enabled by institutional failures, poor reporting structures, coercion, and promised privileges in reward for silence, rather than by trans inclusion, making these bans irrelevant to actually reducing violence against women athletes. Banning trans athletes would do nothing to address the actual pattern of abuse. The trans sports debates is a distraction that lets real perpetrators avoid scrutiny while targeting a vulnerable group of kids instead. And she warns that such bans would subject all girls to invasive scrutiny to verify their sex. If you don't fit the perfect description, if you're not adequately feminine for their liking, what are we going to inspect little girls what's in their pants now? That's disgusting.
Exactly. This seems to be, I think we should only ever call these bills, we should call them like child genital inspection bills, because that's really what they are. I mean, it's not about like it's not even it's beyond the sports. It's about do you have the right to go and invade the privacy of a child?
It's pretty gross when you think of it.
Yeah, that's weird and strange.
Yeah, it
is 100% weird and strange. I want to say there was a lawmaker in Ohio who was calling for just that within the last couple of years. Every accusation, I think, is a confession with these people. And if you look in the churches, you don't have to look farther than Micah Beckwith, our lieutenant governor's own church, to find that the creepy call is often coming from inside the house. So, one person who also has a lot to say about this issue is ESPN commentator Stephen A. Smith, who said that Cantor and White's stunt declaring for the WNBA draft was the right thing to do, even if they're, quote, going a bit too far. Now, last Saturday, Smith was one of several recipients of a thumbs down award from the National Association of Black Journalists, who held their annual convention in Atlanta. They cited Smith for his, quote, recurring public pattern of disparaging commentary directed at prominent Black women across politics, sports, and media, including his remarks about Kamala Harris, Jasmine Crockett, and a public dispute with journalist Joy-Ann Reid. Other recipients of the thumbs down include FCC Chair Brendan Carr, whose agency has pressured media organizations critical of Donald Trump. This week, Disney sued his FCC, alleging a retaliatory campaign against ABC violates the First Amendment, specifically challenging Carr's unusual early renewal order on ABC's 8 Disney-owned station licenses, which weren't due for renewal for years. Also receiving a thumbs down award, the Washington Post, an organization that once had on their banner, democracy dies in darkness, but since the beginning of the second Trump administration, and even a little bit before that, has completely rolled over to the MAGA agenda, showing their ass once again this week with a Washington Post editorial defending new Attorney General Todd Blanche's comments on Meet the Press, where he refused to pledge DOJ independence from the White House, and a local angle as well. The NABJ giving DuJuan McCoy a thumbs down in response to criticisms about he allegedly terminated former Wish TV meteorologist Ashley Brown Elliott when she questioned the station's treatment of other Black employees. And this led to a new non-compete agreement in employee contracts and subsequent mass exodus of Wish staffers. McCoy, in addition to Wish TV 8, also now owns WRTV 6 and My TV Channel 23 in Indy, one guy owning 3 of the 6 major television outlets in Indiana. Now, Bryce, listen, I'm a supporter of Black business, but I don't think one man should own half of the local television stations in the market.
Generally agree. And, I think this question about like Black businesses and whether or not supporting a Black business makes you inherently progressive, this is the kind of the question that goes around during like, Black History Month and, Juneteenth, during these conversations about racial inequity. This idea that, replacing a white oligarch with a Black oligarch is any kind of good. I mean, it's one of the most pernicious things to come out of this neoliberal era, right? Like, you're not going to save. You're not going to make life better for people who've been redlined for years. You're not going to make life better for people who don't have economic opportunities if you just say, well, one of you might one day be sitting in the boardroom making all the decisions with all the white people. It was the same critique that we made against Kamala Harris, right? You can't say that you're some sort of trailblazing feminist Black icon when your entire tenure as vice president, you were supporting genocide. Like you didn't overcome these struggles just so you can do the exact same things white people do. This is a question not of race, not of identity, but of the structures that make our corporate capitalism function. And that's what you should be critiquing. And when we're talking about the media ecosystem, I think the ills of corporate capitalism become all the more defined. I mean, you just reminded me that Disney owns ABC, which, I know that, but, it doesn't have the Disney logo on it. You kind of forget about it sometimes. And then you see the CBS empire, the Ellisons, like this empire that they're building, that they're controlling interest in TikTok, the CNN, they have CBS, they replacing 60 Minutes staff. Like all this is very disturbing trends, but it's just the inner logic of capitalism. You're not going to change that if Larry Ellison was Black.
Yeah, well, yeah, you mentioned the sort of the hollow identity politics of it all. Like, and listen, representation matters. I'm not saying doesn't. It is very important. But like, I don't care if you're the first biracial, non-binary paraplegic out there. If you're selling, if you're doing the bidding of billionaires and autographing bombs destined for children in Gaza, what does it matter? Now, Jennifer, to that end, Bryce mentions Disney, and Disney owns ABC, and like the world that we're in is upside down. They're the good ones, like they're the benevolent media oligopoly. But to bring it back to the local level, things like one person or one conglomerate owning multiple television stations in a single media market used to be illegal. We need to get back to diversity in media, meaning diversity of ownership.
Right. I want to go back to something that you just kind of mentioned. A lot of times we as consumers don't really realize how tied some businesses are with other businesses or who the parent company is of this and that. And sometimes we can be kind of shocked to find out some of those things. And again, it's becoming more and more concentrated.
And industry after industry as well. It's not just media. Like food, for example, is a big one. Like 6 multinational conglomerates own like everything we eat. And boy, if they're not sufficiently given oversight, Bryce has mentioned it a couple times today, with things like food inspections and and whatnot, we get diarrhea lettuce and E. coli blueberries and glass popsicles, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He's brought up that lettuce. Did you get sick? Because you brought
No,
that
I
lettuce
just
thing up a lot.
no, it's actually because I was at a place today and they didn't have jalapenos because they were like, well, we want to be safe and protect our customers from the jalapeno, and it's been like that for like 3 weeks, and the jalapenos are kind of the main reason that I go to this place, and so I've been thinking about it. And I just read a list of all the recalls that have been issued over the last 9 months, and it's more than just the lettuce, it's more than just the jalapenos, it's all sorts of things, and it's because we want to make America healthy again by killing them all, I guess.
Well, it's kind of scary when you think about it, when you have
a little glass in the popsicle. It makes you strong.
Yeah.
Well, when our food becomes so concentrated in who's owning that and producing it, that's very scary on many levels. One, what you're talking about, like with contamination and food, you could wipe out, our ability to even have lettuce for, however long, but then also controlling the money and controlling who is going to be able to have access to, beef or whatever it is.
Right.
So yeah, it's just as scary as like with media, like the information that we get be so controlled and monitored by other people. Which is why it's important that we still have we have shows like this, and that we have print media, newspaper. And one of the things I found with being a column writer now is that even like our newspapers and independent radio like NPR, like they are also tied to the capitalism. Like a lot of money they get is from these, many of the controlling development or businesses in the area or nationally. And again, those are a lot of things that people don't always know.
So many of the local newspapers, they're owned by Gannett or other conglomerates. You've seen them gut local newsrooms. A lot of your little small newspapers is just like syndicated from a larger regional paper. You maybe get a couple little local blurbs. So much of that is it's all the profit motive. It comes down to money in every case. And if there's one overarching theme of this show and kind of all the shows we do, it is that we need to break up the power of the billionaire class and, get back to independent journalism, independent media, independent small mom and pop food operators, just breaking up corporate oligarch power across the board. One last place where I want to talk about oligarchs and private interests trying to get their hands into another public good is education. And, this past Tuesday, I hosted the Who's Left Back to School special. I had a couple school board candidates, a couple policy experts and activists on to talk about the various ways public education in Indiana is under attack on multiple fronts. You've got the privatization front, and then you've also got the Christian nationalism front. Now, one thing we didn't get to talk about was the attack on higher education in our state. And, we've seen IU, for example, increasingly gut important programs, especially in the humanities, have become more MAGA aligned. I joke, as we've gotten better in football, we've gotten worse in education. We're becoming an SEC school. And to that point, IU President Pamela Whitten was in Washington this week, standing side by side with Melania Trump, announcing a joint IU Purdue Fostering the Future program. This is a scholarship program designed for foster youth. Both Fox Sports and IndyCar, who is in Washington this week for a race around the National Mall, donated $2 million to fund the partnership. And listen, don't get me wrong, it's a fine cause. We want to send foster youth to college if we can. And, we could do that a lot better with, universal higher education instead of, a pittance from these large corporations. But I wanted to talk about K-12 a little bit some more as well. Mike Braun this week touting, as we begin a new school year, that Indiana's school voucher program is now fully universal. Income caps have been removed. Previously, families of four making more than $220,000 a year were not allowed to have public monies to attend a private school. Well, now no more. Every family in the state can get a voucher covering up to $8,500 or 90% of what the state would have spent on a student in a public school. This plainly is a handout to families who already choose and paid for private schools, while at the same time defunding the public schools. They tout school choice. In most of the public school districts and most of the counties in our state, there is no choice. You get your public school. They are paying for the private schools. Our kids are suffering, so already wealthy families can get a coupon. Also wanted to note this week, families in Texas have asked the Supreme Court to take up a challenge to the 10 Commandments in schools. We saw our state legislature here in Indiana try to pass a similar law this last legislative session. Wouldn't be surprised if this thing were to go through and be upheld by the Supreme Court if we try this thing again. These families are asking justices to review a ruling by the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in the 5th District that upheld a Texas law that mandates each classroom display a copy of the 10 Commandments in schools. They are seeking to essentially overturn the 1971 case Lemon versus Kurtzman, which establishes a series of tests which determine whether policies violate the separation of church and state. It suffered a severe blow in 22 with the Kennedy versus Bremerton case. This is where a high school football coach in Washington State, who was essentially coercing his players into praying with him on the field, was found to have been acting within his constitutional rights to have done so. Bryce, they're really giving Lemon a squeeze.
Yes. I think what you were talking about with this, this long-term project of privatizing the schools, of, people like Braun and, flanked by people like Pamela Whitten, who is the current president of my school. It's part of this, plan to defund the public sector in order to enrich the private few. The reason that they have charter schools isn't because they improve outcomes for people. If they cared about improving outcomes for people, well, they would just simply reinvest in the public schools. They would make them better. The point is to cut out the public on education. The point is to cut out the public on utilities, cut out the public on democracy in general, and so that you can have these institutions that everyone needs. Everyone needs to go to school. But when you have a captured audience like that, it's very profitable to have these institutions be profit-seeking, enriching machines. And you're seeing this with the Indianapolis especially. I mean, like, one of the big fights that DSA is doing in Indianapolis is fighting against the dismantlement of IPS, the Indianapolis public school system. The fact that it's happening in, like a blue city, even if it's in a red state, it should be worrying to everybody. These are the sorts of investments that our community will benefit from in decades, right? Like, I don't know if you guys both went to public school, but the reason that they were so good, the reason that you got any sort of education there is because decades ago, people said that we're going to invest in the future. That's saying that today, people can't even conceive of that. People can't even conceive of a long-term investment in our children. Without saying who's gonna make money from this, who's going to profit from this. It's just really sad to see overall.
And you mentioned it's an investment, and the numbers show that these investments always pay off to multiples. Not just 1-to-1 if you invest in your kids, 7-to-1, 18-to-1, depending on the policy. And when this goes back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, it's that doom loop that we mentioned, where we take public goods and folks that want to get their fingers in them turn the commons into a profit center. They legislate something, a hurdle. They make it harder for schools. They make it harder for public utilities. They kneecap these organizations. And when they stumble, they say, look, these things are failing. We need to bring in the profit motive to get them to improve. We need to run these public goods like businesses. Jennifer.
So a couple of things come to mind with these schools. You talk a lot about IPS, and it's just these rural communities suffer a great deal as well, because like where I live in Clark County, you see the larger school corporation trying to pull students from other smaller communities, saying, hey, we can offer you more than what you can get in your home school. So when students go there, yes, they might have some more opportunities, which is really good for them. But then again, their homeschool is losing money, and then they're losing their ability to hopefully have some of those same opportunities for students. And so now when you have schools, and of course, across Indiana, we have communities that are much wealthier than others. This just continues the divide between the haves and the have-nots, because now we have schools that are having to pass referendums to get money or whatever for their schools, to help support their schools, because they're not getting enough money. They're losing money. But when you have communities that don't have a lot of money, they don't have the money to give to continue to support that school. And then that just continues a cycle oftentimes of poverty for many communities, because even if you can get a voucher to a school, it doesn't come with the extra fees. It doesn't come with transportation. So just saying, hey, we have this for you, doesn't help people to actually be able to access and use it. And, this also brings into mind what is exactly happening across the state of Indiana and our country with disability supports for people and families. Like, we can say we have these things or we have this money, but they make it extremely difficult to be able to get that, to be able to qualify for that, and then also to be able to actually access the money or the services that are out there. And it's the same with just so many things, as it just becomes harder and harder. Our government specializes in giving us things and then making it as difficult as possible for people to actually be able to access that.
And that right there, Jennifer, that is 20 plus years of Republican supermajority leadership in Indiana in a nutshell. That is 40 to 50 years of the Reagan, Thatcher, Milton Friedman neoliberal era in a nutshell. It is privatize everything, benefits for the top. The rest of us get to fight over scraps. And, our local communities, those schools, there are 38 school districts in Indiana this year seeking a referendum to make up that gap, what they've lost with the property tax cuts from the state. They need it. And I encourage everybody in those communities to vote yes in November. It's hard to ask for a tax cut when people are getting squeezed by everything else, which we've talked about through the entirety of this show. We only got a couple minutes here. Let's wrap this thing up. Jennifer, where can the good folks find you? I know you've got a column regularly in the local paper down there. They
can't find me. I've been staying on the down low lately. I've got several Facebook pages. I usually just am on there. So Jennifer David, you can find me that. I also have Jennifer David Patterns and Perspectives that I've been doing some writing on Facebook too. And I often contribute to the News and Tribune, my opinion column there. It's just the David column. And I write a lot. I try to squeeze in disability issues, autism, as well. And I talk a lot about local government and especially development and how that is really controlling things, at least where I live. And I know in many places across the state where we're looking at these just huge development projects.
Very good. Well, everybody, be sure you're following Jennifer on your favorite social media platform. And if you're in Southern Indiana, read her column and regularly in the News and Tribune. Bryce, where can the good folks find you on the interwebs?
People can find me on twitter.com. I'm still there. Just Bryce Greene Twitter at the Green BJ. And you can find me on my Substack, Bryce Greene Newsletter. Yeah, you can find me around town. I do things. I stay busy.
I appreciate you today. I feel like I got a lot of background and a lot of history on a lot of national things. So I appreciate.
I'm glad I can be of service.
Yeah.
Bryce is one of the smartest dudes I know. Also a hell of an organizer. Hey, how can folks get involved if they're in the greater Bloomington area with Bloomington DSA?
You can go to bloomingtondsa.org. I believe that's what the website is. If you Google Bloomington DSA, you can find it. Like I mentioned, we're up like 500%, and we plan to keep going. We got a good group of people here, and we're doing a lot of good work.
These meetings have been packed lately. We meet the first Monday of every month at First United Church in Bloomington on East 3rd Street
United.
there.
Not to be confused with First United Methodist Church. You know, it's a different church. We're on the third Street Church. But if you want to get involved in any way, shape, or form, you can either shoot me a line, shoot Scott a line, shoot the Bloomington DSA email account a line. We'd love to get you involved. If you have skills, talents, or interests, please seek us out.
Very good. Thank you. And speaking of shooting me a line, you can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Or you can send me a DM on any of those with feedback, or you can email me at scott@whosleft.us. We cannot do what we do here without you, so please support our work with a paid subscription at progressiveindiana.net. Follow us on social media, the network that is, at the full spelled out name, Progressive Indiana Network, on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Again, please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Thanks once again to Jennifer and Bryce for spending part of their Sunday with me. I do appreciate you both immensely, and I'd like to also thank you who are watching or listening for spending part of your Sunday with us as well. Let us keep building this thing, a radically democratic Indiana, and let's do it together. So until next time, I am Scott Aaron Rogers signing off from Bloomington. Love each other, Indiana.